Hi everybody, here's my dialogue presentation. So let's go ahead and get started. So first of all, here is a paragraph. I'm going to read it out loud. I was walking through the mall one day when I saw a group of my friends. Hey, what are you doing here? I thought you guys had to stay after school today. No, football practice got canceled. Mr. Stroh had a meeting he had to go to. Are you here to shop or browse? A little bit of both because I need to find a birthday gift for my cousin, but I really want to check out the sales. Why not get a gift card to her favorite store? So I want you to think about what's wrong with this. How many speakers are there? What's the reason for writing dialogue properly? So here it is correctly written. I was walking through the mall one day when I saw a group of my friends. Hey, what are you doing here? I asked. I thought you guys had to stay after school today. No, football practice got canceled, said Sophia. Mr. Stroh had a meeting he had to go to. Joseph said, Are you here to shop or browse? A little bit of both, I replied, because I need to find a birthday gift for my cousin, but I really want to check out the sales. Why not get a birthday gift for her favorite store? Daniel suggested. So as you can see, there was me, talking, Sophia, Joseph, and Daniel. So there's actually 4 people talking, but that would have been really difficult to figure out in the last paragraph. So what's involved with writing dialogue properly? So hopefully you noticed there was proper punctuation, quotation marks around the things that people are saying out loud for people to hear. And with that, you're going to have commas and periods, question marks, and exclamation marks. You're going to have correct capitalization when using dialogue. And you have something called speaker taglines. And that's what these are, where it says, I asked, said Sophia, Joseph said, I replied, Daniel suggested. Those are all called speaker tags. It lets you know who's talking and how they're talking. So where do we see dialogue? We see it in narrative writing, which is stories. So therefore, we see it in books. We see it in comics. We see it in blogs. We see it in newspapers. Now we're going to practice a little bit of dialogue, and I'm going to teach you some basic rules that you would need to know. So rule number 1 is every time someone speaks, surround their words with quotation marks. So for example, Mrs. Regan exclaimed, "You are an awesome class." I'm saying that out loud for people to hear, so therefore you just put quotation marks around what is being said. Rule number 2, if needed, follow up your dialogue with a tag. These are words used to identify the speaker, which is a tag. So Mark said or Jamie replied, those are considered tags. Words like said, replied, screamed are never capitalized in a tag. Now, there are 3 types of dialogue tags. When the dialogue tag is before the quote, it would look like this. The comma would always follow the tag, and the beginning letter of the quote would always be capitalized. So for example, John asked is the speaker tag. You would have a comma after that. You would have a quotation mark because John is saying this out loud. Where did everyone go? We would capitalize the W in where because that's the beginning of his sentence. Just like when you write a sentence, you capitalize the first letter of the sentence. You do the same thing here because that's the sentence that he's saying. That's the first word in his sentence. Therefore, you would capitalize it. We can see another example here. He finally said, comma, capital F for fine, right? Fine, let's just go for it. So again, capitalize that F because it's the beginning of his sentence. Now, you can also get fancy and put the dialogue tag in the middle of a quote. So when the tag is in between 2 separate sentences, which would be 2 separate quotes, a period follows the tag, and the beginning of the second quote is capitalized. So here's an example of what it would look like. I have a dog, comma, right? Quotation marks because she's saying this out loud. I have a dog, said Jane, period. Do you have any pets? So you can see that we are breaking up her dialogue into two separate quotes. And this is something that authors and writers can do. So you just have to know that if you put a speaker tag in the middle of what is being said, you would have to put a period and you would have to capitalize the beginning word or letter of the word of their second sentence. When the tag splits one sentence, meaning a quote, into two parts, then a comma follows the first part of the quote and the tag. So you can do something like this. I have two dogs, said Jane, that fight all the time. Notice here that these aren't two separate sentences like the sentence above. The sentence above had, I have a dog. Do you have any pets? Those are two separate sentences. This time it's one sentence that's being interrupted by the speaker tag, which is a little weird. It's probably not a tag that's used very often, but you can do this. I have two dogs, said Jan, that fight all the time. Notice how the T is not capitalized this time. That's because that fight all the time is not a complete sentence. The speaker tag is just interrupting the sentence. Therefore, you keep it a lowercase t, and you'll notice that there's a comma here instead of a period. So if this seems confusing right now, it will get easier as we do some practice. There's another example up here you can take a look at as well. This is also a very popular one. When the speaker tag is after the quote, when you do this, the end punctuation after the quote before the tag can never be a period. So here's the example. Everyone decided to go, comma, said John, period. So you wouldn't ever have a double period, which means you wouldn't put a period here and then also a period. It's always just going to be a comma with a period after the speaker tag. Here's another example. You really shouldn't have done that, comma, he whispered, with the period at the end. Also notice that's a lowercase h, not a capital H, and notice here how it's a lowercase s, not a capital S. And again, if this seems a little confusing, it won't be as you do more practice. Rule number 3, if a dialogue phrase ends with a question mark or an exclamation point, you leave the punctuation mark inside the quotation alone. You don't change it. So for example, watch out, there's a T-Rex behind you, right? Exclamation mark. You just leave it alone. And then screamed Riley. You would go ahead and put a period at the end of the sentence. Are you joking? Asked Sam. So if it's a question mark, you leave it alone. You don't change it to a comma or a period because you would never have a double period, right? And instead, it's okay to have a question mark with a period. It's okay to have an exclamation mark with a period, but it's never okay to do a period and then a period, right? That period would just turn into a comma instead. It might look weird to have an exclamation mark and then a period, or a question mark and then a period, but that is how it is because you still need end punctuation at the end of this sentence. Rule number 4, start a new line every time a new person speaks. You need to indent each line. Indent means the text is pushed in. Usually you do that with the tab key by hitting it one time. So here's an example. I indented, Mrs. James asked, "What are you teaching today?" She spun around in her chair and looked at Mrs. Regan, waiting for an answer. Now Mrs. Regan's going to say something. So you would indent my turn to talk by hitting the tab key one time. Punctuating dialogue, Mrs. Regan replied as she took out her grammar book from her bag. And it's important to hit the tab key and to indent. That way it's easier for your reader to follow like who's saying what when. If it wasn't like that, it would be harder for our eyes to track dialogue and to read. So now we're going to go ahead and practice a little bit. Here, I want you to see where you think that what it would look like, basically. So how would you rewrite the sentence below to follow the dialogue rules? Are you ready, kids? Asked the captain. So go ahead and choose which one you think is right. Okay, so hopefully you pick this. Are you ready, kids? That's what's being said out loud for the kids to hear. And then because it's a question mark, you would leave the period at the end of the sentence, right? I mean, you would have a period at the end of the sentence, and you would leave the question mark alone. Number 2, how would you rewrite the sentence below to follow the dialogue rules? The kids exclaimed, "Aye, aye, Captain." So this one would be the kids exclaimed, comma, quotation mark, and it already had a capital A, "Aye, aye, Captain," with an exclamation mark because it says exclaimed with quotation marks after it. Question number 3. How would you rewrite the sentence below to follow the dialogue rules? Who lives in a pineapple under the sea? Asked the captain. So this is the part that's being said out loud for people to hear, right? And the question mark you leave alone, and then you would just have the period at the end of the sentence, and the A stays lowercase. Next one, SpongeBob SquarePants, exclaimed the kids. So that's the part that's being said out loud for people to hear, and it's an exclamation mark, so you leave it alone, and you just put a period at the end. Notice again how the E is lowercase. Absorb it in yellow and pour as he, said the captain. So there you go. That's the part that's being said out loud. You would have a comma inside the quotation mark and then a period at the end. All right. I think this is the last one. If nautical nonsense be something you wish, the captain said, then drop on the deck and flop like a fish. So this one is kind of the weird one where one sentence is being said, but it's being interrupted with a speaker tag. So you would have the quotation mark around if nautical nonsense be something you wish, comma. The captain said, comma again, because you're, again, interrupting one sentence. A lowercase t, because again, it's just one sentence that's being kind of chopped up. And then exclamation mark would go inside the quotation mark. So now that you're done and you've had the chance to practice a little bit, I want you to do a little bit more practice. And there is an assignment in Google Classroom found under grammar. And this is what it looks like down here. I do have a dialogue rules reference sheet to help you with all the rules and examples in case you need a little extra help. And you're going to see the directions are here and my sample one. And I'm just having you do basically what we just did, except for you are going to be adding it in yourself. So hopefully it goes smoothly.